All right, let's dive into two of the absolute pillars of CSS layout, margin and float. These are some of the original tools for controlling where things go on a web page. By the end of this, you're going to have a solid handle on how to manage space and control the flow of your content. Let's get right into it. So let's start with the big question, right? You've got your content, your images, your text, but how do you actually move them around? How do you create breathing room and arrange them so they don't just sit there in one long, kind of boring column? Well, that's the whole game when it comes to web layout. Here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the art of web layout itself, what the browser does by default. Then we'll jump into mastering space with margin. After that, we'll see how to control the flow with float, solve a really common problem that comes with it, and finally, we'll wrap it all up with your new CSS layout toolkit. Okay, section 1, the art of web layout. Before you can start breaking the rules and getting creative, you really have to understand the basic rules first. Every good design has a solid skeleton, and that skeleton starts with what we call the document flow. So out of the box, this is what a web page wants to do. Block level elements. And you can think of things like paragraphs or headings or divs. They just stack up, one on top of the other. Each one tries to take up the full width it's given. You add a new element, it just goes right underneath the last one. It's simple, for sure, but maybe not the most exciting look. So, how do we start breaking out of that rigid vertical stack? Well, our very first tool is all about creating some breathing room. Let's talk about mastering space with margin. The easiest way to think about margin is like an element's personal bubble. It's this invisible space that just pushes other elements away from it. Super important to remember, this space is outside the element, beyond any border it might have. This brings us to the CSS box model, which I love thinking about as an onion. Right at the very center, that's your content, your text or your image. The next layer out is padding. Then you have the border. And finally, on the very outside, that's where the margin lives. And today, we're focused on that outermost layer. And the great thing is you have super precise control. You can add margin just to the top, or just to the right, or the bottom, or the left. This is what lets you nudge elements around and create really specific, intentional spacing. So here is a classic layout challenge. You've got a box, maybe a div, and it's just stuck over there on the left side of the page because, hey, that's the default. But what if you want it smack dab in the middle? How do you pull that off? Well, the solution is beautifully simple. You just set the left and right margins to auto. That one little word tells the browser, hey, figure out how much empty space there is on the sides, and then just distribute it evenly. This is a huge takeaway. Margin auto is your go-to trick for centering block elements horizontally. It's just so simple and so powerful. All right, so creating space is great, but what if we want to fundamentally change how elements actually interact with each other? This is where our next tool comes in. Let's look at how we can control the document's flow using float. The float property is really cool. It literally lets an element break out of that normal top-to-bottom stack we talked about. It tells all the other elements, especially text, to just neatly wrap around it. It's exactly like how text flows around a picture in a magazine or a newspaper. Okay, so here's that default behavior again. We've got an image, and all the text that comes after it just gets pushed down below. The image creates this hard break, and it's not a great reading experience. But check this out. The moment we apply float left to that image, it's like we've lifted it out of the normal flow. It snaps to the left side. And now, look, all of that text flows beautifully into the empty space on the right. This completely transforms the layout. And of course, it works both ways. You can use float left to push an element to the left and have content wrap on its right side. Or you can do the exact opposite with float right, pushing the element to the right and letting content fill in the space on the left. Now, float is incredibly useful, but it does come with this one classic gotcha. Since floated elements are kind of taken out of the normal document flow, they can sometimes cause some weird problems for the boxes that are supposed to be holding them. And here it is. This is the problem. You see that parent container, the box with the border? It no longer recognizes the height of the floated image that's inside it. It's like the image has escaped, and it's overflowing past the bottom. The parent box just collapses as if it were totally empty. So this leads us to a super important question, one that web developers have been dealing with for ages. How do we make that parent element aware of what's going on inside it? How do we get it to stretch and properly contain all the floated items? Now, in the past, there were all these complicated hacks to fix this, but today, thankfully, we have a really clean, modern solution. You just apply display flow root to the parent container. This basically tells the container, hey, I don't care what's floated inside you, your job is to contain it. And just like that, the container snaps to the right size and the problem is solved. So let's bring this all home. You now have two of the most fundamental tools for creating layouts in CSS. Let's just do a quick summary of what we've added to our toolkit. Okay, quick recap. The key takeaways. Use margin when you need that personal space outside an element. Use the magic of margin auto to easily center your block level elements. Use float when you want that magazine-style text wrap. And if your floated item ever escapes its container, display float root on the parent is your modern clean fix. So margin and float are the classics. They're foundational tools, and it's still really important to understand how they work. But honestly, they set the stage for even more powerful, more flexible layout systems. So the real question is, now that you've got the classics down, are you ready to see what's really possible with modern tools like Flexbox and Grid? Thanks for watching.